The morning heat had already settled like a wet blanket over the Georgia clay by the time Zariah Cole rolled up the bay door to her garage. The air was thick with humidity and motor oil. She slipped on her navy blue coveralls patched at the elbow, stained at the thigh, and tied her braids into a tight knot. Her hands bore the permanent shadow of grease no soap could scrub out. But she wore it like armor inside. The gutted '67 Mustang waited, who'd propped open like a wounded soldier. She didn't flinch at the mess of wires and hoses.
Oh.
Machines made sense. People didn't. Jazz crackled faintly from the old radio her grandfather once fixed after someone tossed it in a dumpster. Her fingers moved with purpose-checking spark plugs, tracing fuel lines. She worked in silence, save for the occasional hum of Billie Holiday and the clink of her wrench against metal. That Mustang had history, so did she. Her grandfather Jeremiah Cole used to say, "Engines don't lie, people do." He'd built planes for the war, but came home to Collaroods, only signs and whispers behind his back. Still, he opened a garage, trained kids no one else would hire, including Zariah. Z, come on. How you gonna do a man's job with them skinny little arms? He used to tease before handing her a torque wrench twice her size. He taught her to read schematics before she could ride a bike. The only diploma on her wall bore his name. At 29, Zariah ran the garage alone. Clients trickled in, mostly old-timers who trusted her precision, and the occasional curious passerby who expected a white man and left confused, or worse, amused. The bell above the door jingled. She stood, wiping her hands. A man in a crisp golf polo and khakis looked around with a smug twist to his lip. He was tall, ruddy-faced, and spoke like he expected the world to nod along. "You the mechanic?" he asked, looking behind her, as if expecting someone else to emerge. "I am." He glanced at the Mustang, then back at her. "Didn't know. They let you girls get greasy now." Zariah blinked once, slow. She didn't flinch, didn't scowl, just wiped the sweat from her brow and said nothing. He chuckled at his own joke. Handed her a business card, read Callahan, collector of classics, and sauntered back to his silver Range Rover. She stared at the card a long time after he left. The engine behind her ticked as it cooled. She could feel the words clinging to her skin like exhaust. "I let you girls... Zarir," walked back to the Mustang and picked up. Her wrench didn't matter. Let him laugh. Let the world laugh. She was still going to make that damn car sing. And when the right job came along, the one that would finally prove what her grandfather already knew, she'd be ready. Just like always. And somewhere outside. A silver Range Rover turned the corner, trailing arrogance in its exhaust. The morning after Reed Callahan's visit, Zariah found his card, still sitting on her workbench, curled at the corners like it couldn't bear its own name. She almost tossed it, but something in her gut told her that arrogance doesn't visit just once. She was right. By noon, the silver Range Rover rolled back in like a storm cloud. This time, it didn't come alone. A cherry-red trailer followed behind, polished and gleaming, bearing the emblem of Callahan's prestige like a badge. The ramp dropped with a theatrical hiss. A dozen heads, locals and tourists alike, peeked from across the street, drawn by the sudden spectacle. Zariah stepped out of the shadows of the garage and into the sun. "Thought I'd give you a real challenge," Red called out, voice syrupy with condescension. He stepped aside, revealing the car. The Aston Martin DB for British Engineering, Racing. Pedigree, and under the hood a notoriously delicate engine barely anyone could keep running. Rumor had it this one had sat untouched for decades. Zariah folded her arms, brow low. "Looks like it hasn't taken a breath in years," he smirked. "Exactly. A perfect opportunity for someone like you to show what she's made of." The words dripped venom behind their civility. "Someone like you?" Zariah said nothing at first. "Not yet." Reed turned to the small crowd, now forming like flies to a wound. "I'll bet $5,000 she can't get it too idle, much less run," he declared. "But hey, proved me wrong, miss. What's your name again?" A few chuckles echoed off the brick buildings. Zariah's hands clenched at her sides, still stained from the Mustang she hadn't even finished. Reed's eyes gleamed. This wasn't a test, it was theater. A show. Named Zariah Cole, she said calmly. And I don't bet. I build. That didn't stop him. We'll never fix it. He chuckled, loud enough for the audience. It's not your fault. You're just a black woman. Silence. Even the cicadas went mute. Zariah stared at him, not blinking, not smiling. Her breath held in her chest, like it might explode. And then, something in her cracked, not broken, but opened. She stepped forward. I'll do it, she said, her voice clear, deliberate. No charge. But when it runs and, it will run you. Come back here, alone, and you say my name. Reed laughed like it was sport, then tossed her the keys. She caught them midair. She's all yours, he said, turning to the crowd. Let's see what this little mechanic can do. The Range Rover peeled away, kicking up dust as it disappeared beyond the bend. Zariah stood still as the trailer ramp creaked closed. The crowd dissolved slowly, whispers lingering like bad aftershave. She approached the car, circled it like a predator, then opened the hood. Inside, it was chaos-corroded parts, brittle belts, wiring like a bird's nest. The heart of the beast was silent. Yes, but not dead. She could feel it. And as her fingers touched the metal, memories returned in flashes, her grandfather's hands guiding hers, the smell of motor oil. The voice that told her, engines don't lie. Behind her, a neighbor passed by and nodded silently. The sun beat down. The bay doors remained wide open. Zariah took a breath. This wasn't ego. This was survival. And survival always starts with one spark. The garage door rattled closed behind her. Dust settled around the Aston Martin like it was a relic in a tomb. Zariah stared at the open hood for a long time before moving. No music played. No tools clinked. Just silence and the long inhale she forced through her nose. Before picking up the socket wrench, she started with the fuel system. One bolt turned, then another. Each twist felt like peeling back the layers of something older than rust. The engine groaned in protest, brittle from time and neglect. As she traced a cracked hose, her hand trembled just enough to notice. She gritted her teeth and kept going, but memory is its own kind of corrosion. Suddenly, it was 3 years ago. The officer's face flashed uninvited. The glare in his eyes as he pressed her against her own car, accusing her of theft because a girl like you doesn't drive that clean a ride. She'd spent 6 hours in a holding cell. No apology, just silence when the truth caught up. Back. To the present, the wrench slipped. Her knuckles scraped metal. Blood welled slowly as pain followed. She sat down hard on the stool beside the car, breath short. Her heart raced, chest tight. The walls narrowed. The air inside the garage thinned until it felt like drowning. She closed her eyes. Her grandfather's voice reached her through the haze. Breathe, Z. Engines need air. So do you. But all she could see was the moment he died on that frigid hospital bed, after being denied by the white cardiologist who never once looked him in the eye. Too late to operate, they'd said. Too risky. She gasped, pressing her palms to her chest. Then came a knock. Soft, deliberate. Luis stood in the doorway, grease on his jeans, a bag of parts in one hand, 2 cold bottles of water in the other. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her, really looked. Then, gently, walked in and crouched beside her. You okay? He asked. She shook her head barely. He handed her a bottle, sat with her in the stillness, letting the seconds stretch. He didn't rush her, didn't try to fix it. They think we forget, she finally whispered, eyes still closed. But the body, ... it stores it. Luis nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Same with war. They sat side by side as the light shifted on the garage floor. After a while, he slid the bag of parts toward her. Found a replacement solenoid in Macon, rare as hell. But I knew you'd need it. Zariah managed a small smile, cracked and tired. She reached for the bag with hands that still shook. The engine wasn't the only thing being rebuilt outside. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the scent of sun oil and something else. Hope, maybe. or the memory of it. She stood, slowly wiped her hands, looked at Louise. Let's make her breathe again. And with that, she walked back to the car, heart still aching, but steady now. The garage never truly slept anymore. By the second week, story had crawled out of their sleepy town like oil through concrete. A clip of Reed's bet captured by a passing teenager and posted to TikTok went viral. For a day, some cheered her on, called her a hero. Others filled her inbox with slurs, insults, and questions like, "Is this some diversity stunt?" Zariah stopped checking her phone. The garage lights stayed on past midnight now. Empty coffee cups lined the counter. She worked by lamplight and instinct, her hands blackened and raw. Louise dropped by with tools and tamales. No one else dared. Then came the envelope. No name, no return address, just a piece of printer paper. Shoved under the door. Stay in your lane. That night, she installed a new lock. The next, she moved a cot into the back room. By day, reporters hovered outside, peeking in through cracked windows, snapping photos as she ducked behind the Aston's hood. Up by night, shadows lingered longer. A car once idled outside for half an hour. She memorized the license plate. When her mother, Renee, appeared at the shop on a stormy Tuesday, she didn't knock, just walked in, soaking wet. Eyes wide with panic. "You need to stop," Renee said, voice trembling. "This isn't pride anymore. This is danger." Zariah kept working, fingers tightening a hose clamp with a quiet rage. "I know." "Then why?" "Because this isn't just about the car anymore." Her mother stepped closer, whispering. "Like the walls were listening? You think I don't remember what they did to your grandfather? I buried that man." Zariah paused, her hand shaking slightly, then forced the ratchet one more click. "I'm tired of burying everything." That night, after Renee left, rain pounded the tin roof. Zariah laid in the dark with her arm over her eyes. She didn't cry. She listened to the creaks, to the thunder, to the noise inside her own bones. At 3:12 a.m., glass shattered. The front window, she ran out barefoot, heart racing. A brick lay among the shards. A slur scrawled across the side in black marker. She stared at it, then bent down, picked up the glass with trembling fingers, and sliced her palm wide open. She didn't scream, just walked back to the bench, wrapped her hand in duct tape, and returned to the engine bay. As she reached in to adjust the fuel line, a single drop of blood slid down her wrist and disappeared into the shadowed machine. The Aston remained silent, but it was listening. So was she, and somewhere in the darkness, something old inside her began to harden into resolve. The duct tape on her palm had begun to peel. Sticky and stained, but Zariah barely noticed. Dawn was just a smear of pale gold across the edge of the sky when the fuel pump gave out with a sputtering hiss. She cursed under her breath. Again, her hands dove back into the Aston Martin's belly until she saw it. The rotor arm cracked. Hairline fracture, invisible until now. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She'd replaced nearly everything. This piece vintage, rare, was essential. Without it, the engine would cough, jerk, then die before it could purr. And no one in the county carried it. Zariah sank onto the floor, back against the cold brick wall, dirt smeared across her cheek. She pulled her knees in and pressed her forehead to them, breath ragged, body aching. The pressure had hollowed her out. So many eyes watching, some waiting for her to rise, others eager for her to fail. She was so tired of holding everyone's expectations, fears, and hopes in her chest like they belonged to her. She didn't hear the bell jingle at first. It wasn't Luis. It was a slow shuffle. Cane tapping on concrete and the rustle of a paper bag. "Zariah," came the voice, warm and lined with years. She lifted her head to see Mrs. Eloise. Her old third-grade teacher, wrapped in a shawl and holding a homemade pie in one hand and folded parchment in the other. "Wasn't sure if sweet potato or pecan was your thing," she said gently. "So I brought both." Zariah blinked away, the sting in her eyes. Eloise sat beside her without asking. For a moment, they just breathed in the scent of oil, rain, and cinnamon. When I was 16, Eloise began, they made me the first black girl to walk into McKinley High. White kids threw rocks at me. One spit in my hair. Zariah didn't speak, just watched her face. You know what I did? The older woman said, looking straight ahead. Zariah shook her head. I walked slower. Didn't run. I let them see I wasn't going anywhere. Loways smiled faintly. They didn't want me to survive the walk. But I didn't just survive. I stood. She turned now, eyes soft but fierce. Don't fix that engine for him. Fix it for every girl who learned to shrink. Zariah swallowed hard, a tear sliding silently down her cheek. Before she could answer, the door flung open. Luis rushed in, face flushed, hair windswept. He held something in his hand, wrapped in an oil rag. Found it, he said breathlessly. A guy 2 counties over. Wouldn't sell it, but I talked him into a trade. He unwrapped the rotor arm and held it out like an offering. Zariah stared at it, eyes wide. For a second, she didn't move. Then slowly she stood. The fatigue was still there, so was the pain. But beneath it something else. She took the part from Luis with reverence, stepped to the car, and lit the desk lamp. Its light formed a golden halo over the engine. Her fingers trembled as she lowered the piece into place. Gentle sight. Fit perfectly like it had been waiting for her. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, the Aston held its breath. Tomorrow, it would speak. But tonight, Zariah stood in the silence, no longer afraid of what it would say. The morning arrived thick with summer heat and tension. Dew steamed off the pavement as the town gathered, like it always did for spectacle. Not football, it's not church. Just whispers, cell phones, and a bet they never expected to watch unfold. Zariah stood inside the garage, wiping the last smudge of oil from her face. Her hands taped, bruised and trembling, hovered over the Aston's hood. It gleamed like it had risen from its own grave. Every screw, every hose, every valve had been placed with precision. Every piece of her was in that car. Outside, a crowd had formed curious townsfolk. A few news crews, and at the center, smug and sharp as ever, stood Reed Callahan, his arms folded, aviator sunglasses in place. Beside him, a man muttered, "What's she even doing? That car's a coffin." Reed didn't answer. He was watching too closely now. Zariah stepped forward. She raised the hood with care, revealing the engine like a relic at an unveiling. Her movements were slow, deliberate. Crowd hushed. Cicadas paused. She looked at Luis, who stood near the shop's edge, arms crossed, nodding once. Then she met her mother's gaze, Renee, tight-lipped but steady. And then she turned the key. Silence. The world seemed to stop breathing. A sputter, a cough, the tiniest pause, then dash roar. The Aston Martin came alive with a sound that punched. The air, deep, guttural, and unmistakably defiant. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Someone whispered, "No way." Reed's face didn't move, but his jaw did tighten. Zariah didn't smile. She didn't throw her arms in the air or cheer. She stepped back, wiped her hands on a rag, and walked to where Reed stood. Her boots echoed on the concrete. "Yo. Never fix it," he'd said. She stopped in front of him, eyes level, voice even. "Guess I wasn't just anything." He blinked, lips parting as if to speak. Then came the words, soft and rattled. "I'll be damned." Zariah leaned in, close, enough for only him to hear. "You already are." She turned and walked away. The crowd parted like scripture wordless. Reverent behind her, the engine kept humming, smooth and sure, like it had waited its whole life for that moment. Sunlight bounced off the car's hood, catching her reflection. In chrome, she didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stood. Camera shutters clicked. Reporters scrambled for quotes. But Zariah ignored them all. Instead, she walked toward her mother. Renee's hands were clasped over her mouth, eyes wet. "That was your grandfather's walk," she whispered. Zariah smiled, then barely. "I know." Luis reached her next, lifting her hand like a fighter in the ring. "Right. Told you it would breathe." "Didn't know it would scream," she said, Voice light now? It's floating above the weight. Mrs. Eloise stood near the mural wall and clapped once. It was enough. Others followed, not a standing ovation, just real. Respect born not from awe, but understanding. Zariah looked out at them, all faces she grew up with. Faces that never saw her, faces that now had to. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was fighting to be here. She was here. She turned back to the Aston. Running one hand across its hood, the roar had quieted into a smooth purr, content, complete. She exhaled. Tomorrow, there would still be bills, still be stairs, still be battles. But today, she made an engine and a town remember her name. The key still sat in the ignition, and next to it, the door swung, open, waiting for whatever came next. The wind felt different now. It carried the scent of oil, sure, but also fresh paint, chalk dust, and the occasional burst of laughter from behind the garage. Zariah had left the bay doors open every day since the engine, the Aston Martin, had long since returned to Reed Callahan's private showroom. The echoes it left behind still lived in every bolt, every smile, and every brave hand reaching for a wrench. 3 months had passed. Summer faded into the honey-gold stillness of October. The town never officially said anything, but the silence had changed shape. People waved now. The gas station clerk asked about brake pads instead of making assumptions. Kids on bikes rolled past the garage like it was sacred ground. It had become more than a business, it had become hers. On the eastern wall of the building, stretching 10 feet tall, was a mural. Her former art teacher had painted it one weekend with 3 students from the high school's Black Student Union. In it, Zariah stood shoulder to shoulder with her grandfather Jeremiah Cole, head tilted, eyes smiling, both dressed in navy blue. Coveralls, grease on their hands, a burning sun rising behind them like a second engine. People came from out of town now, not for the story, but for the truth. They walked through her garage like it was a chapel. But Zariah didn't care for sermons. She cared for spark plugs, socket sets, and kids who'd been told they weren't enough today. A dozen girls ages 9 to 16 lined the workbenches. Goggles slipping down their noses, sleeves rolled up, sleeves rolled back again. One of them, Imani, small and silent, with 2 tight puffs and eyes too wide for her face, stood holding a wrench upside down. Zariah noticed. She walked over slowly, crouched beside her. "You ever hold one before?" she asked. Imani shook her head. "Only watched my cousin." "Well, watching's good," Zariah said, gently turning the wrench in her hand. "But now it's your turn." Imani looked up at her, lips parting like she wanted to ask something, but wasn't sure she was allowed. Zariah waited. Finally, Imani whispered, "Was it true? Did you really fix that car?" Zariah's eyes softened. She reached for a nearby tea rag, wiped her hands, then looked the girl dead in the eye. "Yeah, I did." Imani's gaze dropped to the floor, then rose again. "Was it hard?" Zariah smiled, slow and real. "Harder than anything I've ever done. But you know what?" Imani leaned in. "I was born to do it." She handed the girl a fresh wrench. "So were you." In the background, a newly donated Chevy Impala rumbled to life, its first breath in 20 years. The girls clapped. One shouted, "Miss Zariah." It moved. Music played low from the old radio, still patched with duct tape from the 90s. Luis was under the hood, grinning as he adjusted the throttle. Mrs. Eloise sat nearby, sipping sweet tea and knitting something purple. Zariah's mother, Renee, leaned against the wall, arms folded, head shaking in disbelief but smiling now. Always smiling. No one talked about Reed Callahan anymore. His name wasn't blacklisted, just faded. It's like steam off a hot hood. But the words he'd spoken that day still rang, not in bitterness, but as a kind of anchor you'll never fix. It, and then she had. Now that insult lived not in memory, but in purpose. It had been alchemized, reshaped, repurposed like so many broken things in her life. Zariah looked around. Girls learning to lift, not just wrenches, but themselves. Grease-stained hands proud of what they built. Voices that didn't tremble when they asked for parts. It was a garage, Yes, but it was also a classroom, a sanctuary, a revolution wrapped in denim outside. The wind stirred again, lifting a corner of the old tarp near the fence. The mural caught the light just right. Her grandfather's smile seemed to move, like approval from somewhere beyond steel and sky. Zariah exhaled and picked up another wrench. There was still work to do, but this time, she wouldn't do it alone.